Greetings to everyone listening. This is our project for the CS403 assignment. This project is based on social engineering, specifically penetration testing policy. This is our group, Group 13. Group 13 consists of 4 members. They are Pranav, Chen, Shiva, and Aryan. This presentation covers the XYZ financial firm social engineering penetration testing policy version 1, approved June 2025. This policy establishes controlled testing procedures to stimulate real-world social engineering attacks and strengthen our human defenses. We'll begin by looking at the policy's purpose and its key definitions. The agenda for this document is first, the policy overview, second, the rules of engagement, moving on to testing methodology, reporting, some of the legal considerations we need to look at, the review of the policy, and finally, our conclusion. As stated in the policy, the purpose is to define requirements and procedures for a controlled social engineering penetration test. These tests simulate real-world attack scenarios to evaluate and improve the human element of the firm's cybersecurity posture. In other words, by identifying and mitigating risks in employee behavior, the firm both complies with regulations and promotes a culture of security vigilance. What this basically means is that we are always aware of the risks projected by the external threats, but how often does this threat reside or arise from the employees within the organization? It is often claimed that people are the weakest link in information security. So before understanding the policy, we need to understand some key definitions. The policy clearly defines social engineering terms. Social engineering itself is described as the art of utilizing human behavior to breach security without the participant even realizing they have been manipulated. It also defines common attack methods. The first one, phishing, fraudulent emails to elicit sensitive data, and vishing, voice-based phishing, as well as tailgating, following an unauthorized person into a secure area. And then finally, red team means that the authorized testers and blue team refers to internal staff monitoring and responding to the attacks. These definitions sets the stage for our testing approach. Let's move on to the rules of engagement. The policy emphasizes strict control over any testing engagement. Before any test, the leader must submit a rules of engagement document. Let's first understand what is the rules of engagement document. It is a formal agreement that defines how the testing will be conducted. It outlines the boundaries, scope, legal protections, communication protocols, and expectations to ensure that the test is safe, authorized, and most importantly, ethical. Some of the key details to highlight in this document are the scope of testing, the type of test, authorization, time frame, communication plan, the impact, the legal protections, and the success criteria. One of the reasons why it is one of the most important documents is because it ensures that ethical boundaries are respected. It protects both the organization and tested from legal or reputational risks, and it prevents misunderstandings that could lead to real incident response or employee panic. Crucially, all tests must be authorized in writing by the Chief Information Security Officer or designated security leadership. Engagements are scheduled for a defined period, no more than 2 consecutive weeks, and it is conducted only by approved internal teams or certified external ethical hackers under valid contract. In other words, no surprise tests. Every exercise is planned, approved, and constrained to ensure transparency and safety. Now, this completes the introduction to the policy and engagement rules. Now, I will hand it over to my colleague Pranav to explain the testing scope, the methodology, and how the red team operates while also protecting our systems.
Hello, my name is Pranav. Now let's move on to section 4, testing perspective. This part of the policy focuses on how social engineering penetration tests will be approached. In other words, what the tests are really trying to evaluate. The goal here is to measure how vulnerable employees are to human-based attacks, the kind that don't rely on software bugs or firewalls, but instead trick people into making mistakes. These attacks can come in several forms. Firstly and most commonly, phishing emails. These are fake but convincing messages that try to lure employees into clicking malicious links or sharing login credentials. Second, we have vishing, which are phone calls, where attackers pretend to be IT support, HR, or even clients to extract sensitive information. Third, physical entry attempts, such as tailgating, where someone slips in behind an employee without using a badge or pass to get physical access to secure areas within the XYZ firm. And finally, USB drops, where attackers leave infected USB drives around the office, hoping someone plugs them into a corporate machine to gain access to confidential data. The point of this testing isn't to trick employees for fun. Instead, it's to test the organization's human defenses. So how do we define success during this test? It's not just whether someone clicked the link or answered a call. Success is based on the organization's ability to identify, report, and contain the threat also. That means the employees should recognize the suspicious activity, report it to the right channels, and trigger a timely response from IT or security teams. Ultimately, these tests are not about punishment. They're about building awareness, improving incident response, and strengthening the organization's overall security culture. Now let's talk about roles and responsibilities, which is one of the most critical parts of the penetration testing policy. When conducting a social engineering penetration test, it's not just about the red team doing all the work. A successful, ethical, and safe engagement requires cooperation from multiple departments, each with clearly defined responsibilities. Firstly, we have the Chief Information Security Officer. They are the strategic leader of the entire operation. They're responsible for approving the scope, objectives, and testing methods, making sure the test fits into the company's overall cybersecurity strategy, and acting as a central point of coordination between departments and the red team. In short, the CISO ensures the test happens with full alignment, visibility, and accountability. Next, we have HR, Human Resource. HR plays a very important support and compliance role. Their responsibilities include ensuring that the testing respects labor laws and internal employee conduct policies, running awareness sessions both before and after the test, helping to manage any responses to employees who are affected by the test, and working with the legal department to make sure ethical treatment of staff is always maintained throughout testing. This ensures employees are not unfairly penalized or harmed by the testing process. Next, we have the red team. This is the group that performs the simulated attacks. Their job is to design realistic social engineering scenarios based on approved engagement rules, gather intelligence and model potential threats, then execute the test in a controlled and safe manner. Finally, they must document everything without causing business disruption. They also help compile the findings and provide input into the final test report. Next, we have the Information Technology Department. They provide the backbone support during the testing. They're responsible for creating full backups of systems before the test begins, monitoring of any unintended technical impacts during testing, isolating the test infrastructure if needed to protect live systems, and responding quickly to any confusions or alerts triggered by test activity. They ensure the technical environment is stable, even when stress tested by a simulation. Finally, we have the legal counsel. They ensure everything stays within the law. Their duties include reviewing all legal and regulatory compliance aspects of the test, checking contracts, NDA, non-disclosure agreements, and liability protections, making sure employee rights and privacy are fully protected, and guiding data collection, storage, and communication in line with the privacy regulations. To wrap up this section, the policy emphasizes that open communication is essential. All parties from HR to IT to legal must stay reachable and collaborative during the entire testing period. If anything unexpected happens, everyone must be able to respond quickly and decisively. By clearly assigning roles like this, the organization ensures that social engineering tests are safe, ethical, and legally sound. Now let's look at Section 6 of our policy, Scope and Limitations of Testing. This section defines what parts of the organization and which activities are included or excluded from the social engineering penetration testing. Setting these boundaries is crucial to avoid misunderstanding, legal risk, or even unintended disruption to the business of XYZ firm. First, let's talk about the organizational scope, or which departments are being tested. The test will include areas where human interaction is frequent and where sensitive information is often handled. This includes the front desk or reception, where people may gain physical access to the building. The finance and accounts team, who handle transactions and sensitive data. The human resources department, which stores confidential employee information. Customer service representatives, who regularly interact with the financial firm's clients and external contacts. And finally, the IT support and help desk staff, who are common targets in impersonation attacks. These teams are selected because they represent realistic attack vectors in any organization. Next, we have the system scope. What technologies and systems are covered in this social engineering approach? The test will involve the corporate email platform, which is the most common vector for phishing. Then we have VoIP phone systems used internally and externally for voice communication. This can be used in vishing. The employee directory and staff contact lists can be exploited for targeted attacks. And the visitor management systems and physical access controls for testing physical entry attempts. Finally, the internal intranet portals or shared documentation platforms can often contain sensitive but poorly protected information. Together, these systems represent the technical surface attackers often exploit when launching social engineering campaigns. Now, what types of attacks are allowed during testing? These are all realistic, low risk simulations that mirror common social engineering tactics. We have phishing emails, fake but believable emails to test who clicks or responds within the firm, phishing calls, voice based scams, tailgating, testing the physical entry, USB baiting, dropping rogue USBs in the office to see if anyone plugs them in, and pretexting, creating a false identity or story to trick someone into giving up information. All of these test the human element and not the technical defenses of the firm. So we are testing the social engineering aspect here in this policy. Finally, we must understand what is out of scope. Just as important as what's included is what's not allowed. Out of scope activities are strictly banned to protect the company's reputation and operations. No deployment of malware or ransomware will be allowed, as this can cause a risk to their real systems. No tests that target senior executives or external clients to avoid PR and trust issues. No simulations after hours or on weekends, which could catch staff off guard or be misinterpreted as a real attack. No exploitation of software vulnerabilities, because that is a different type of test entirely and not within social engineering. And finally, absolutely no access to real customer data. This is a legal and ethical boundary. Respecting these limits ensures that tests are professional, controlled, and safe for the organization. In summary, by clearly defining what's in scope and what's out of scope, this policy ensures that penetration testing is effective without crossing the ethical, legal, or operational boundaries. Next, let's move on to Section 7, Backup and Continuity Strategy. This part of the policy is all about making sure that the testing process does not interfere with the business operations of XYZ firm. And that's a solid plan in place in case something goes wrong. First, we have system backups. Before the testing begins, the IT department is required to perform comprehensive system backups. This includes the email systems such as Microsoft Exchange or cloud mail services, all user data across devices in storage, and critical application infrastructure, meaning the core systems the business relies on. These backups must be stored securely and must be verified for integrity, so that if anything unexpected happens during testing, systems can be quickly restored without loss. Secondly, no malicious code or system impact. The second part of this section is a strict rule. Under no circumstances can the red team introduce malicious code or cause any disruption to live production systems outside of the agreed testing scope. Even though this is a simulated attack, the goal is never to damage or interrupt normal operations. Finally, we have incident response readiness. What happens if the test accidentally triggers a real-world response, like system alerts? In that case, the incident response team must be ready to quickly assess the situation and determine whether it's a test or a real attack. That's why the policy requires the designated contact points to be available at all times during testing. If anything unexpected occurs during these times, these contact people must be notified immediately so they can start appropriate containment, escalation, or recovery actions, all in line with the company's business continuity protocols. So even though this testing is focused on social engineering, we must still ensure that the operations are not disrupted while this testing occurs, and we must safeguard against any possible risks. Now I'll explain Section 8, Testing Methodology, the heart of our penetration testing policy. This methodology is adapted from the social engineer. Now I'll explain Section 8, Testing Methodology, the heart of our penetration testing process. This methodology is adapted from the social engineering framework described by Watson, Mason, and Ackroyd, and it comprises 6 distinct stages, and we have adapted it here. Let's walk through each stage. So, in this part of the policy, the testers must understand what are the steps required by the XYZ firm. First, we have the pre-engagement interaction. Before any testing begins, there is a crucial preparation phase. This includes engagement objectives, scope, and timelines. We start by clearly defining what we want to achieve. This includes setting specific objectives, understanding the full scope of what will be tested, and establishing a schedule for engagement. Next is establishing rules of engagement and legal protections. Now we set the ground rules, what is allowed, what isn't, and how communications will be handled. This ensures everything is legally protected and that there is no ambiguity in execution. Next is identifying our primary contact points. 2 primary contact points are designated. Importantly, they come from different departments. For example, one may come from IT and one may come from security. These contacts act as the emergency escalation points and remain reachable throughout the test in case anything goes wrong. Finally, we obtain authorization from executive leadership and coordinate all logistics, including contact persons and support channels. This thorough preparation guarantees that everyone is on the same page before testing starts. The second stage is all about information collection, the intelligence gathering. The collection of public information. We gather publicly accessible data about the organization and its employees. This includes scrapping the email addresses, phone numbers, and even metadata from the documents found via search engines and social networks. Through this open source intelligence, we identify potential entry points that attackers might exploit. This step forms the basis for constructing realistic attack scenarios. Next, we have threat modeling. Now that we have our information, we shift to planning. Analyzing the intelligence. We analyze the collected data to construct plausible attack scenarios that reflect the organization's unique risk profile and their operational workflows. We select the attack vectors. From this analysis, we select specific tactics such as fake help desk calls, delivery pretext, or baited USBs that align with the vulnerabilities identified earlier. This process ensures that each scenario is relevant and realistic that will make for an effective testing. Then we have the execution, where we execute the test. This includes deploying the scenarios under live conditions. The testers will execute the approved test scenarios using the selected attack vectors. The tests are conducted in a live environment but under strict control conditions as specified in the other sections of the policy. Then we have the tracking success metrics. Success is carefully measured through metrics like information disclosure, any credential capture, or physical access breaches. These metrics help the XYZ firm understand how effective our social engineering methods are. Finally, it's about ensuring safety. Throughout, the testers will have to adhere to safety controls designed to prevent any disruption to the XYZ's business operations. All observations are recorded discreetly and ethically, ensuring that data collection is thorough without impacting the organization. Next, after the execution of our testing activities, we have some additional activities which are conducted, the post-execution activities. We have secondary objectives. Where permitted, we attempt secondary objectives, such as simulating data exfiltration after access is gained. This helps in assessing deeper vulnerabilities, but they can only be done once given permission by the XYZ firm executives. Then we have testing escalation and lateral movement. We simulate escalation or lateral movement scenarios to test how far an attacker could potentially move, but importantly, without accessing any real customer data, as this would be unethical and against the policy. Finally, terminating our scenarios. Once all objectives are met, the scenarios are terminated promptly to ensure that testing does not overstep the intended boundaries given in this policy. Finally, we have reporting. The final stage involves detailed documentation and communication. We have comprehensive reporting, where we compile a detailed report covering all aspects of the engagement, including technical and executive summaries. And we have the stakeholder debrief. We offer optional presentation sessions and debriefings with the stakeholders to discuss findings and recommended improvements. This creates an opportunity for XYZ firm to give direct feedback and ensure that actionable insights are clearly communicated between the testers and the firm. This structured testing methodology ensures that our penetration testing meets all the business, ethical, and legal expectations. By following this systematic approach in this policy, the firm will be able to obtain actionable insights that help strengthen the human layer of the organization's cybersecurity defense. Now I will hand it over to my colleague Chen, who will talk about the legal and ethical compliance aspects of this policy.
Hello, my name is Chen. Now let's move on to section 9, which is legal and ethical compliance. This section is critical because it ensures that all social engineering tests are conducted responsibly, legally, and ethically. It protects both the organization and the employees. First, let's look at compliance with law and regulation. First and foremost, all penetration testing activities must comply with applicable laws and regulations. This includes the General Idea Protection Regulation for data protection in the EU, which is the GDPR. Local data privacy acts, depending on the country and region, and employment laws that protect the rights of employees during testing. This ensures that no test violates privacy rights or legal boundaries, no matter how realistic the simulation is. Next is the confidentiality and NDAs. All red team personnel, whether internal staff or third-party vendors, are required to sign non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements. This legally binds them to protect sensitive information, including test results, employee behaviors, and any data encountered during the engagement. It helps prevent leaks, misuses, and any unauthorized disclosure of sensitivity findings. Lastly, let's look at ethical testing practices. This means avoiding psychologically harm, such as embarrassing or humiliating employees, preventing reputational damage, or using test data responsibly, and ensuring informed consent, which is typically granted during employee onboarding or outlined in global organizational security policies. This ethical approach ensures that all testing is seen as learning opportunity and is not a trap, and that employees are respected throughout the process. In summaries, this section ensures that the social engineering tests don't just test for security gaps, they also reflect the company's value and legally integrity and ethical responsibility. Okay, let's move on to section 10, which is data handling protocol. This section is all about how the information is collected during the penetration test, is stored, protected and deleted. It's to make sure that it doesn't fall into wrong hands or get misused. First is data encryption. Is any data that is collected during the test, for example, fake login details used in phishing tests, logs of employees reacted, and timestamps showing when people click or responded. All of those data must be encrypted. That means it is locked using special software so no one can read it without permission. It must be encrypted while it being sent and also while it being stored. This is called encryption in transit and at rest. It's one of the most important way to keep data secured. Next is limited access to data. Not everyone in a company is allowed to see the raw data. Access is limited to a small group of people. They include the security team who runs the desk and senior leaders or executive stakeholders who need to review the results. This is to make sure that sensitive information like who fall for phishing tests isn't shared around the company or used unfairly. Last is report hidden and disposal. When the test results are written up in a report, all employees' names, personal details must be hidden. That means removing or hiding their identity. The report are kept safely for 12 months just in case they needed to follow up, training, or audit. After that, they are securely deleted or destroyed so the information can't be recovered or misused later. In short, it is to make sure that any information collected during testing is protected, only seen by the right people, and deleted after a set time. It helps to keep employees' trust and protect the company from data risk. Now, let's look at section 11, which focuses on how the company trains employees to stay safe from social engineering attacks. First is regular training. All employees get regular security awareness training. This covers things like how to spot phishing emails, how to communicate securely, and how to report suspicious activities. Next is extra training for high-risk roles. Employees in high-risk roles like finance, HR, IT, and executives get extra role-specific trainings. They handle sensitive data, so they need to be even more prepared for targeted attacks. Next is post-test feedbacks. After penetration testing, all employees who was affected will get constructive feedback, and if needed, they are retrained. This isn't about blaming them, it's about helping people to improve in the company. Finally, is sharing the results. Test results are shared with the company every quarter, but in hidden form so no one is singled out. This helps the entire firm learn and improve without pointing fingers. In short, this section makes sure that everyone from interns to executives is trained, supported, and part of the firm's security defense.
Thank you, Chen. Hello, I'm Shiva, and I'll be discussing on reporting. So this section explains how the results of the penetration test are organized and shared in a clear, professional way. The report starts with basic pages like cover, title, and a disclaimer to mark it as confidential. A table of contents helps people to navigate the report easily. Then the introduction explains the purpose of the test, who was involved, and how long it lasted. The executive summary gives a short version of the key findings for senior management. Next, the report includes social engineering overview and methodology. details on threat modeling and a scenario used, and then finally a review of what happened during the test in the execution section. Each attack type, like phishing or vishing, is described with a result and impact. At the end, the reporting and delivery section explains how the findings are shared with the company leaders, usually through a presentation or brief session. Overall, this section makes sure that the test results are clear, well documented, and useful for improvement for future security. So now moving on to section 13, that's violation and enforcements. This section explains what happens if a policy is not followed. First, doing unauthorized penetration testing, misuse of test data, or ignoring the policy rules is considered a violation. If an employee breaks the rules, they could face disciplinary actions, in a serious case, even terminations. If a vendor violates the policy, their contracts can be cancelled, so they may face legal actions. And finally, the policy also reminds us that it can cover every possible situation, so everyone involved in testing is expected to use good judgment and clear communication to handle unclear or unexpected issues. In short, this section sets clear consequences for violations and encourages responsible behavior during all testing activities. So in this final section, that's review and approval, it explains how the policy is kept up to date. Firstly, the policy will be reviewed once every year by the Informed Security Governance Committee. It can also be reviewed sooner if there is a big change, like updates to the company's system, new security threats, or even new legal requirements. After any updates are made, they will be shared with all relevant teams through the company's internal communication channels, so that everyone stays informed and aligned. This ensures that the policy remains effective, relevant, and fully compliant with the current risk and regulations. Thank you.
In summary, we've covered the main points of the XYZ Financial Firm's social engineering testing policy. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for the wonderful semester. We are looking forward to the exam. Any questions?